right, welcome back, everyone. Today we are going deep, really deep into Kashmir Shaivism.
Ooh, interesting.
I know, right? I've got excerpts here from Wikipedia and even a YouTube transcript all about it.
Okay.
And honestly, it's pretty mind-blowing stuff, this whole non-dualist branch of Hinduism, but with Shiva at the very center of it all.
Yeah. And the fascinating thing is that in Kashmir Shaivism, Shiva isn't just like, another god in a pantheon.
Right.
It's more like Shiva is the ultimate reality, like the source of everything.
So everything we see, everything we experience, it's all just like Shiva in disguise.
Exactly. Every single thing is a manifestation of Shiva.
Hmm.
So we're talking Kashmir around 850 CE is where this all starts to emerge. And it really flourished in Kashmir, but it spread to other parts of India too.
Odisha and Maharashtra.
That's right. You did your research. And it drew from Tantrism, this idea of pursuing spiritual power, Shakti.
Right, Shakti.
But it goes way beyond just rituals. It's a deep dive into the nature of reality itself, asking the big questions.
And speaking of deep dives, the sources mention these texts called the Shiva Sutras. And get this,
Yeah.
apparently they were revealed to this sage, Vasugupta, in a dream.
Whoa, talk about divine inspiration, right?
Seriously. And these texts laid the groundwork for understanding Shiva as this absolute consciousness, the source of everything.
Absolutely. And then you've got the Spanda Karikas, which explore this concept of spanda, like this primal vibration underlying all of reality. It's like the pulse of the universe.
So everything is buzzing with this divine energy.
In a sense, yeah. But here's where it gets really interesting, because if everything is Shiva, how do we explain all the differences we see in the world?
Right, good point. Yeah, like how do we make sense of all the, messiness of life?
Exactly. And that's where Kashmir Shaivism takes a different turn from other non-dualist philosophies like Advaita Vedanta. Advaita says that the world is an illusion, Maya.
Okay.
But Kashmir Shaivism says, no, the world is real.
Okay, so it's not an illusion.
But its reality is the reality of Shiva. It's like everything is real, but its ultimate reality is Shiva.
Whoa, okay, I think I'm starting to get it. It's like seeing the world through Shiva-colored glasses.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And the sources use this really great metaphor. Shiva is like the light.
Okay, the light.
And the universe is like the reflection of that light in a mirror. The reflection is real, it exists, but it's inseparable from the light itself.
I love that. That's a really helpful image. Okay, so the sources also mention these big names like Samananda and Paladeva, and then there's this Abhinavagupta.
Ah, yes, Abhinavagupta.
They all played a part in shaping these ideas, right?
Oh, absolutely. And Abhinavagupta, he lived around 950 to 1025 CE, and he's considered like one of the most important figures in the whole tradition. He was a scholar, a poet, a musician, even a family man. Like he was a true polymath.
And from what I read, I think he was even described as having this constant air of trembling ecstasy about him, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, it definitely suggests that this wasn't just some abstract philosophy for him, but something he lived and breathed.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about everything being Shiva, but the sources also mention this idea of Shakti, the divine feminine, which is pretty important. Or
Hugely important, yeah. Think of Shakti as the dynamic power of Shiva. Like Shiva is pure consciousness, while Shakti is what gets things done.
Oh, I like that. Okay. So Shiva is the being and Shakti is the doing.
Exactly. It's like this cosmic dance between the two. The universe unfolds through Shakti. It's a process of self-reflection within Shiva.
So it's like this constant interplay between being and becoming, and that's where the Spanda comes in again, right?
Yes. Spanda is that vibration, that creative pulse, driving this whole interplay of creation and returning to unity. It's the energy that keeps the universe, well, universal.
Okay, so we've got Shiva, Shakti, Spanda, this whole idea of the world being real, but also a manifestation of the divine. This is a lot to take in.
It is a lot, yeah.
But where do we fit in? How do we experience this as individuals?
That's where this idea of recognition comes into play. It's called pratyapanya in Sanskrit.
Okay.
And it's at the heart of Kashmir Shaivism.
Okay, recognition, got it.
And the idea is that we've all forgotten our true nature as Shiva.
We've forgotten who we really are.
Exactly. And the path to liberation is all about recognizing this divine essence within ourselves.
Oh, so it's like remembering who we truly are on this, like, cosmic level.
Exactly. It's not just about belief, though. It's about direct experience.
Ah, I see. So how do we actually, like, do that?
Well, that's where the practices of Kashmir Shaivism become really important. Because it's not just a philosophy, it's a living tradition with all sorts of techniques and rituals that help you realize that unity with Shiva.
Okay, so things like meditation, mantras, all that.
Precisely. But Kashmir Shaivism takes it a step further. It recognizes that everyone might connect with the divine in different ways.
Right. Different strokes for different folks.
Exactly. And that's why they have these four upayas or methods, each one a different path towards liberation.
So there's no one size fits all.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You've got Anavopaya, which focuses on individual effort, practices like meditation. Then there's Shaktapaya, which is all about wisdom and understanding. And there's Shambhavopaya, which is more about this spontaneous recognition, almost like grace.
So whether you're like a disciplined meditator or someone who leans more towards surrendering to a higher power, there's a way in.
Exactly. And then there's the most elusive upaya, the anupaya. It's called the methodless method. And it's really about pure divine intervention.
Wow. Okay. That one's a bit of a mystery.
It is, very much so. But, we've covered a lot of ground here, history, core concepts, even touched upon some practices.
We have, and it's fascinating stuff, really.
Yeah, it is. But
What did this actually look like in practice? I mean, was this just for like scholars and mystics, or did everyday people engage with this too?
that's a great question. And it leads us to one of the most interesting aspects of Kashmir Shaivism, this whole idea of living in the world, but recognizing the divine in absolutely everything.
All right, now we're talking. This is where I think things could get really interesting.
Well, you see, unlike some spiritual traditions that are all about renunciation and withdrawing from the world, Kashmir Shaivism encourages full engagement with life. It's about finding the divine in the everyday.
Wait, are you saying that, like, even doing laundry could be a spiritual practice in Kashmir Shaivism?
In a way, yes. It's about bringing awareness and intention to every action.
Yeah.
Seeing that divine spark in literally every moment.
So it's not about escaping the world, but transforming the way we experience it.
You got it. It's about seeing the world through those Shiva-colored glasses all the time. And that's what makes Kashmir Shaivism, well, so life-affirming, I guess you could say.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal, but how does that actually work? Like, how do you actually find the divine in the mundane?
It all comes back to Shakti. Remember how we talked about Shakti as the dynamic power of Shiva, the force that makes things happen? Well, in Kashmir Shaivism, Shakti is also the energy that animates our lives, our thoughts, our actions, even our passions.
So it's not about suppressing our desires, but understanding that they, too, are part of this divine dance.
That's it, exactly. It's about embracing our humanity, but not getting lost in it. It's about recognizing that even our most earthly experiences can be a pathway to spiritual growth and realization.
This is really resonating with me, but to be honest, it also feels kind of daunting. Like, how do you maintain that level of awareness all the time?
It's a practice, for sure. It's not about being perfect, but about making a conscious effort to see the world through a different lens.
So the more you practice, the easier it gets.
Exactly. And that's where those practices of Kashmir Shaivism that we talked about earlier come in. They provide tools and techniques to cultivate that awareness.
So you can train your mind to see the divine everywhere.
In a way, yes. And remember those four upayas we mentioned. They each offer different approaches to connecting with the divine.
Right, the Anavopaya, Shaktapaya, all those.
Exactly. For example, Anavopaya, with its emphasis on things like meditation, can help you find that inner stillness even amidst all the chaos.
So even when life gets crazy, you can create that space within to connect with something deeper.
Yes. And then Shaktapaya focuses on wisdom and understanding, which can help you see past all the illusions and recognize that underlying reality of Shiva.
So it's about seeing the world for what it truly is.
Yes. And then you've got Shambhavopaya, which is all about spontaneous recognition, that sudden flash of insight.
So sometimes it's not about striving or efforting, but just being open to those moments of grace.
Exactly. And, of course, you have the Anupaya, the mysterious methodless method.
Right. That one still feels a little out there.
It does. It's definitely more esoteric. But the point is, there are different ways to approach this idea of recognizing the divine in everything.
Okay, so we've got the philosophy, we've got the methods, but what about the actual practices? You mentioned meditation and mantras. Are there any other techniques that people use in Kashmir Shaivism?
Oh, there's a whole range of practices. Some are more internal, like visualization, and some are more external, like rituals and offerings.
It's a whole system.
It is. And remember, in Kashmir Shaivism, the body isn't seen as an obstacle to liberation, but as a vehicle, a temple even.
I like that, a temple for the divine.
Yeah. And that brings us back to the tantric aspects of Kashmir Shaivism, which, as you know, is often misunderstood.
Yeah, people often think it's just about, well,
Sex, yeah, I know. But it's so much more than that.
So what is it about them?
In its essence, Tantra is about harnessing the power of energy, Shakti,
Okay.
in all its forms. And yes, that includes sexual energy, but it's not limited to that. It's also about creative energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy, all of it.
So it's about recognizing the power within and channeling it in a way that helps us grow spiritually.
Exactly. And in Kashmir Shaivism, Tantra plays a crucial role in this process of recognizing the divine in literally everything.
All right, I'm hooked. Tell me more. What does this tantric side of things look like in practice?
Well, one of the key concepts in Tantric Kashmir Shaivism is this idea of raising the Kundalini.
Okay, Kundalini, I've heard of it, but to be honest, I don't really know what it means.
It's this powerful energy that's said to lie dormant at the base of the spine. And through specific practices, this energy can be awakened and drawn upwards through the body's energy centers, the chakras.
So it's like a spiritual energy boost or something?
You could say that, yeah, but it's much more than just that.
Okay, so how do you awaken this Kundalini?
That's where the tantric practices come in. Things like breath work, visualizations, mantras, even specific physical postures and movements.
Okay, so we're not just talking about mindful dishwashing anymore, are we?
Not exactly. But the idea is that by raising the Kundalini, you're not just energizing your body, you're opening yourself up to a much deeper experience of the divine.
So it's like a catalyst for spiritual transformation.
Precisely. And this transformation can be incredibly profound, leading to states of ecstasy, bliss, even a sense of unity with the divine.
This is fascinating, but also a little intense. Is it safe to do this?
That's why it's crucial to approach these practices with guidance from a qualified teacher. It's not something to mess around with on your own.
Right, you can't just DIY a Kundalini awakening.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, the awakening of the Kundalini isn't the end goal in itself. It's a powerful experience, but it's just one step on the path of spiritual liberation in Kashmir Shaivism.
So it's not about becoming superhuman, but about continually cultivating that recognition of the divine in every aspect of life.
That's it, exactly. And that's what makes Kashmir Shaivism so profound and so appealing. It's not just about philosophy or practices. It's about living a life that's infused with awareness, joy, and that deep connection to the source of it all.
I have to admit, I came into this with a lot of questions and maybe a bit of skepticism, but I'm starting to see the beauty and depth of this tradition.
It's a tradition that invites us to see the world through a different lens, to recognize that divine spark in everything and everyone, and to live our lives with a sense of wonder and reverence.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this segment. We've covered a lot of ground, and I think we all need a moment to process. We'll be back soon to explore the tantric dimensions of Kashmir Shaivism in more detail, so don't go anywhere.
I look forward to it.
Okay, so we're back and ready to unpack this idea of finding the divine in the everyday, which is like a core part of Kashmir Shaivism, right?
It is, yeah.
And I've got to say, it's a pretty refreshing take, especially compared to some traditions that are all about, like, renouncing the world.
Yeah, it's definitely more grounded.
For sure. But how does it actually, work? How do you go about finding the divine in, like, doing the dishes or being stuck in traffic?
Well, it all starts with awareness. Remember, in Kashmir Shaivism, the world is a real manifestation of Shiva.
Right, right.
So even those, like, seemingly mundane parts of life are infused with that divine energy.
So it's not about what you're doing, but how you're doing it. Like, I can wash dishes mindlessly, or I can wash dishes with this sense of presence, knowing that even this simple act is part of that whole cosmic dance of Shiva and Shakti.
Exactly. It's about shifting your perspective, seeing that divine spark in every single moment.
So even something as ordinary as making a cup of tea can be like an act of devotion.
Precisely. And this is where the concept of Shakti comes in, that dynamic force that drives creation, the energy that makes things happen.
Right, we talked about that.
Well, in Kashmir Shaivism, Shakti is also the energy that animates our lives, our thoughts, our actions, even our desires, our passions.
So it's not about denying our human experience, but understanding that it's also an expression of the divine. Like our desires, our creativity, our life force, it's all a form of Shakti.
You got it. It's about embracing our humanity fully, but not getting lost in it. Recognizing that even those earthly experiences can be a path to spiritual growth.
Okay, this is all making sense, but I gotta be honest, it's a little daunting too.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, how do you keep that level of awareness up all the time? How do you not get, swept away by the everyday stuff, the stress, the distractions?
It's definitely a practice. It's not going to happen overnight. But the more you cultivate that awareness, the more you start to see the interconnectedness of everything, the more you recognize that spark in every encounter, the more natural it becomes.
So it's not about being perfect, but just about making that effort to shift your perspective.
Exactly. And that's where those practices of Kashmir Shaivism can be so helpful. They offer tools and techniques to tap into that divine energy.
To help you remember who you really are.
Exactly. And remember those 4 upayas we discussed.
Yeah, the different paths.
They each offer a different approach to cultivating that awareness and connecting with the divine.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Like Anavapaya, with its focus on individual effort and practices like meditation, can help you develop that inner stillness, that focus.
Ah, okay. So even in the midst of the craziness, you can find that quiet space within.
Precisely. And then there's Kaktapaya, which focuses on wisdom and understanding,
Right.
which helps you see through the illusions of the world and recognize the reality of Shiva.
So it's about getting a deeper understanding of, like, the bigger picture.
Exactly. And then there's Shambhavapaya, which is more about spontaneous recognition, that kind of grace that comes from surrendering to the divine.
So it's not always about striving, but about being open to those unexpected moments.
Exactly. And then, of course, you've got the Elusivanapaya, the methodless method.
Right, the mysterious one.
Yeah, that one's always going to be a bit of a mystery. But they all offer different ways of approaching that core idea of recognizing the divine in everything.
Okay, so we've got the philosophy, we've got the paths, but what about the specific practices? What other tools does Kashmir Shaivism offer besides meditation and mantras?
Well, there are a lot of different practices. Some are more internal, like visualization,
Okay.
and some are more external, like rituals and offerings.
So it engages, like, the whole person.
It does mind, body, spirit. And it's important to remember that in this tradition, the body isn't seen as like an obstacle to liberation, but as a vehicle, a temple even.
Yeah, I like that. A temple for the divine.
It is. And that brings us back to the tantric aspects of Kashmir Shaivism.
Right, which we definitely need to talk more about because, as we said earlier, I think there are a lot of misconceptions around Tantra.
Yeah, for sure. Unfortunately, Tantra's been kind of reduced to just its sexual aspects in popular culture, but there's so much more to it than that.
So what is it really about then?
In its essence, Tantra is about harnessing the power of energy, of Shakti,
Okay.
in all its forms. And yes, that includes sexual energy, but it's not limited to that. It's about creative energy,
Yeah.
emotional energy, spiritual energy, the whole spectrum.
So it's about recognizing that power within and learning how to use it in a way that aligns with our spiritual goals.
You got it. And in Kashmir Shaivism, Tantra plays a crucial role in this process of recognizing the divine in everything, including our own bodies and desires.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. So what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, one of the key concepts in Tantric Kashmir Shaivism is this idea of raising the Kundalini.
Okay, Kundalini. I've heard that term before, but I'm not really sure I understand what it means.
It's often described as this kind of dormant energy that lies coiled at the base of the spine.
Okay.
And through specific practices, this energy can be awakened and drawn upwards through the body's energy centers or chakras.
So it's like this spiritual energy boost, but how do you actually awaken this Kundalini?
That's where the tantric practices come in.
Okay.
These can include things like breath work, visualizations, mantras, even specific physical postures or movements.
All right, this is starting to sound a little more intense than washing dishes mindfully.
It can be, yeah, for sure.
But the idea is that by raising the Kundalini, you're not just energizing your body, but you're also opening yourself up to this deeper experience of the divine.
Exactly. And this transformation can be really profound.
So it's not just about feeling good, but about facilitating a real spiritual shift.
Exactly.
Wow, this is all so fascinating. It seems like Tantra really adds another layer of depth to Kashmir Shaivism.
It does. And I think it's a good place to pause and let our listeners process all this information.
I agree. We've covered a lot.
We have.
But we'll be back soon to explore those tantric dimensions of Kashmir Shaivism in more detail, so don't go anywhere.
Okay, so we're back, and I'm ready to dive into this whole Kundalini thing. It sounds pretty intense, but also, incredibly powerful.
Yeah, it can be both. But it's super important to approach these practices with, respect and understanding.
Right, of course.
Because remember, in Kashmir Shaivism, the body isn't seen as something to be, transcended or denied.
Right.
It's seen as this vessel for the divine.
Okay.
And the Kundalini energy is, it's a potent force within that vessel.
So it's not just about, spiritual enlightenment, but also about honoring and working with the physical body.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes Kashmir Shaivism's approach to Tantra so unique. It's not about escaping the world, but about fully embracing it, including our physicality, our desires. Okay, so how does that actually play out in practice? What are some of the ways people in this tradition actually work with the Kundalini energy?
There are a bunch of different techniques. Some are more physical, like Hatha Yoga,
Oh.
which uses postures, breath work, and locks to channel energy throughout the body.
I've definitely heard of Hatha yoga, but I always thought it was more about like flexibility and stress relief. Are you saying it has this like deeper, more spiritual dimension in Kashmir Shaivism?
Oh, absolutely. In this tradition, Hatha Yoga is seen as a way to prepare the body and mind for the awakening of the Kundalini.
Interesting.
It's about creating balance, strength, and flexibility, not just physically, but also energetically.
So it's like laying the groundwork for a more profound spiritual experience.
Exactly. And then there are practices like Kriya Yoga, which focuses on specific breathing techniques
Okay.
to purify and activate the energy channels.
So the breath becomes a tool for working with the Kundalini. That's fascinating. Are there any other techniques?
Yeah, a lot of practitioners also use mantra and visualization.
Oh, right.
Mantras are those sacred sounds or syllables that are repeated to focus the mind and evoke specific energies. And visualization involves creating mental images to guide the flow of energy.
So you might use a mantra to connect with, like a particular aspect of Shiva or Shakti, and then visualize that energy moving through your body.
Precisely. And all these practices are ultimately aimed at raising the Kundalini energy from its dormant state at the base of the spine up through the chakras until it reaches the crown chakra at the top of the head.
And what happens when it reaches the crown chakra? Is that like enlightenment?
Well, it's not quite as simple as that,
Right?
but the awakening of the Kundalini is often described as a really transformative experience. It can lead to a sense of expanded consciousness, a deeper connection to the divine, and even like a merging of the individual self with the universal consciousness of Shiva.
Wow. Okay, that sounds pretty incredible, but also a little intimidating. Is it safe to like awaken this energy? Are there any risks?
That's why it's so important to approach these practices with guidance and respect. It's not something to be taken lightly. It's best to work with a qualified teacher who can guide you through the process safely.
Yeah, it's not like you can just like download a Kundalini Awakening app.
Definitely not. And it's important to remember, the awakening of the Kundalini isn't the end goal in itself. It's just one step on the path of spiritual liberation in Kashmir Shaivism.
So it's not about achieving some like superhuman state, but about continuing to cultivate that recognition of the divine in every aspect of life.
Exactly. And that's what makes Kashmir Shaivism so profound.
Yeah.
It's not just about philosophy or practices. It's about living a life infused with awareness, joy, and that deep connection to the source of all creation.
I have to admit, when we started this deep dive, I had a lot of questions, maybe even a little skepticism, but honestly, I'm walking away with this newfound appreciation for this tradition.
It's a rich tradition.
It is. It's challenging, it's complex, but it's also incredibly beautiful and inspiring.
It really is.
And I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive into Kashmir Shaivism. I know I'm going to be thinking about all this for a long time.
It's been my pleasure. And for everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you've enjoyed exploring Kashmir Shaivism with us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that spark of divine curiosity burning bright.